Turn it over to Dr. Stephen Weiner, who will be speaking to us today about his mother's experience as a hidden child in Belgium. Dr. Weiner.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. Can you all hear me? Awesome. Okay. So we have around 45 minutes or so, and we got a lot to cover, and I want to make a deal with you. Some of the times in my story, I actually have some very old historical things that I want to pass on to you so you can take a look at them, right? And let's make a deal that you handle them really, really carefully because they're super old. Some of them are from 1942, okay? We got a deal? So we'll try to pass them around. Okay, now, let me get this and we'll get going. Our story, my mom's story, takes place in a country called Belgium. How many of you have ever heard of Belgium? Oh my goodness gracious, that's great. That's fantastic. Belgium is this tiny little country the size of Maryland. It has this population the size of Pennsylvania, around 12 million people, and it's sandwiched between Holland to the north and France to the south. And Belgium is actually a very interesting country because, as you see here, you see the green up here? Well, up there they speak a low kind of Dutch. It's a slang, a Dutch slang. It's called Flemish. Flemish. And you see this tan area? Well, those folks speak French. My family is from Wallonie. They're Walloon. They speak French. French was my first language. Now, the French and the Flemish don't like each other. They don't speak to each other. You can't understand, the French can't understand Flemish and the Flemish can't understand French. Isn't that crazy, right? So what holds them together? Well, they have a king and a queen. Here's the king, King Philippe and Queen Mathilde. That's the Belgian flag. But what holds them together is a lot of interesting cultural stuff, like Belgian beer, like Belgian waffles, like diamonds from Antwerp, like a world-class soccer team. How many of you ever heard of the Red Devils? The Belgian Red Devils, World Cup, fantastic soccer team. And of course, Belgian chocolate. How many of you have ever had Godiva or Belgian chocolate? Yeah, all of that stuff holds the country together. Now, I just wanted to give that background to you so that you know what country we're talking about. And by the way, the capital is Brussels. In French, it's known as Bruxelles, Bruxelles, and in Flemish, Brussels, Brussels, and in English, Brussels. That's where my family is from, Brussels. Okay? And by the way, I want to have a hard stop at 1 o'clock so we can have questions. So keep your questions for that, okay? We start our story here in the 1930s, a long time ago, where there was a very handsome young king named King Leopold and his beautiful wife, Queen Astrid. How many of you ever heard of Princess Diana in England? What happened to Princess Diana? Yes, sir. Yeah.
Wasn't it like a carriage crash?
Yeah, a car crash. Yeah, she died in a car crash. Well, guess what? And everyone was really upset and really, really mourning her. Well, the same thing happened to Queen Astrid. She died in a car crash, and all of Belgium was really sad. Why am I telling you this? Stay tuned. There's a whole story about the King of Belgium and his wife. So just remember King Leopold, okay? So, May 10th, 1940, Nazi Germany invades 3 countries in one day. The war started already in 1939, but in 1940, on May 10th, the Germans invaded Holland, Belgium, France, and Luxembourg, I should say, in one day. My mom remembers that day as if it was yesterday. And every May 10th, I would get up, and my brother would get up in the morning, and she would recount the exact same story. They heard the planes coming over in Brussels, dropping bombs, and everyone was very frightened. And they turned on the radio, and the announcer said, "Everyone go to the firehouse." They didn't know why, but so everyone went except for my family, because my grandfather, his name was David, he had a bad back, so he was in bed. And all of a sudden they saw a German car with German soldiers coming up to their house. And my grandfather told my mom, who was 11 years old at the time, and her sister, who was 13, and his wife, my grandmother, he told his family, "Go to the roof and jump if they're coming to arrest you. It's better that you do that than be arrested by the Nazis." Why do you think that was? Because the Belgian Jews already knew what the Nazis were doing to the Jews of Germany. The German officer came to the door, knocked on the door. My grandfather limped out of bed, and he said, "Excuse me, sir, we're lost. We need directions." And then he looked really hard at my grandfather, the German officer, and he said, "If I were you, I'd get out now." And he left. And that begins the story. So every day, things got worse and worse for the Jews of Belgium. There were restrictions, and this is an actual sign in French that basically says all the Jews of Belgium must register with the local authorities. And there was a lot of anti-Semitism. What is anti-Semitism? Does anyone know? Yes, sir.
Hatred against Jewish people.
That's right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that answer. That's right. And there were two big anti-Semitic parties in Belgium. The Flemish, the Dutch, their anti-Semitic party was led by this guy, Staff de Klerk, the VNF party, and the French anti-Semitic party was led by Léon Degrelle, and they were known as the Rexists. For the Jews of Belgium, I want you to put yourself in their shoes. If you were Jewish, your age, at that time, you would have to give up all your social media, your phones, your television, radio, everything. Now, in those days, they didn't have phones or social media. They just had radio. So the Jews had to give up their radio. They were not allowed on the streets after 7 or 8 o'clock at night. There was a curfew. They were not allowed to be lawyers, doctors, teachers. They couldn't go to college. They couldn't go to high school. They couldn't go to middle school. They were segregated from society. They were not allowed to marry a non-Jew. And if they were already married to a non-Jew, they had to divorce them. And they had to wear something called the Jewish star. That, you see this star right here? It says J, and that stands for Juif, which in French means Jew. And you had to have that on every piece of your clothing. If you did not, you could be arrested and sent away. So this is a picture of my mom's family. Now, my mom's a little girl in that picture, but her name was Bella Flora. Bella Flora. And that's her mother, Fela. That's her grandmother, Hannah. She was visiting from Poland, and she went back to Poland, but she was killed in the Warsaw Ghetto. 250 of my relatives were killed in the Warsaw Ghetto. They were transported to concentration camps and gassed upon arrival. This is my grandfather, David, Bella's father, and he is the mastermind of the survival, as you'll see, and that was Bella's sister, Jeanne. She was 2 years older. Everyone see? Now, remember when I said all the Jews had to register? This is the actual card that my grandfather had from the Germans, and it says the Association of Jews in Belgium. And there it is in Flemish. So, David has a plan. And here's his plan, my grandfather. He goes to the cafe every day. And he talks to different people. And everyone thinks he's crazy, by the way, when he's talking like this. But he'll say, for instance, I'm sorry, what's your name? Quinn. Hey, Quinn, how are you? So, hey, Quinn, I have some valuable pieces of furniture. Could I store them with you at your house? Would you take care of them in case something happens to me and my family? And Quinn would say, sure. Or maybe Quinn would say no. And David started giving things away, slowly but surely, until he finally asked this young man, Carter, almost. Okay, Carter, if something happens to my family and the Germans start getting really bad, can they hide with you? Can we hide with you? And Carter would say, sure. And my grandfather asked 3 or 4 people. Why? He made wallets, belts, and purses. So all of his customers were very good friends of his that he sold all of these leather goods to. So everybody in the cafe would say, oh, David, you're nuts. This is Belgium. We're civilized. Nothing's going to happen to us. Yes, bad things happen to the Jews in Germany, but not in Belgium. We are a Western society. We are a democracy. And David had his plan. This is the last photo that we have before my mom went into hiding, and the only photo that we have of my mother. This is Bella, right here. She's looking down. The one in the middle, that's her best friend Marie. Her family escaped to Switzerland. And Frida, her other best friend, was killed. She was your age. My mom is your age in this picture. You know why she's looking down? Do you see the German officer in the back? You see the German officer in back of her, everyone? He slapped her after this picture because she was not wearing her star. And she ran home crying. The day came when she was working on a report. I'm going to hand this out to you. This is actually from 1942, so handle with care. She was working on this report on the history of Belgium. I'll start with you, Quinn. Just take a look at it. And she had very neat handwriting, by the way. And she was working on the report, and someone came for her and said, is Bella here? Can we take her out of class? And they took her out of class. She never went home. They went right into hiding. Why? Because her father had received a letter from the Germans saying, Bella and Jean must report the next day with one suitcase to the town hall, and we are taking them to Germany. This was the Gestapo, the secret police. They basically were going to take his 2 girls away. That was the day they went into hiding. And that's the day that he went to his friend and said, we have to hide with you. The friend's name was Monsieur Jacques Mer. And they stayed there for 2 weeks. And then at the end of 2 weeks, one day David got a letter. My grandfather got a letter. Anonymous. What does anonymous mean? It wasn't signed, right? It wasn't signed. And the letter said, if you don't give us all of your money and your valuables and everything you own, we are going to turn you into the secret police, to the Gestapo. My grandfather read the letter. It was a beautiful sunny day. It was a Sunday. It was a quiet morning. And he said, "You know what, Monsieur Jacquemer? I think we're going to take a little walk outside. I think it's safe. We're going to walk. We're just going to take a stroll." And he gathered his family, my mother, her sister, his wife, and they walked out, and they never came back. Who do you think wrote the letter? Monsieur Jacquemer. Monsieur Jacquemer. And remember when he talked to a couple customers? He went to the second customer. That customer's name was Leonard van Rillard. Leonard van Rillard. Everyone say that name with me. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Leonard van Rillard. His nickname was Parrain. Everyone say that. Parrain. That's in French, and that means like Godfather. It means Godfather. And my mother called Leonard van Rillard Parrain. I'm telling you that because when we go through her letters, you'll understand. So, this is an actual picture when the Nazis started rounding up the Belgian Jews in August of 1942. The Jews were rounded up in all of the major cities and towns, and they were sent to a military barracks known as the Caserne d'Ossun. The Caserne d'Ossun. And they were held, there you go. You can take a look at it and just pass it around. Actually, you know what? We should start that way and then go that way. All right? Sorry about that. All right. They were held there for days, weeks. 1 bucket for a toilet. Very little food. When it was blistering hot, they stood there under the sun. When it was super cold, they shivered. And then they were put on cattle cars, packed in for a 4-day trip to Auschwitz. The babies and toddlers and old people died in those cattle cars. Now, Leonard van Rillard, Parrain, basically said, "Listen, you can't stay here in Brussels. It's too dangerous. They just had a big roundup. It's too dangerous. My wife's family has a small cottage right up here in Mechelen. Mechelen is Flemish. In French, it's known as Malines, but we're going to call it Mechelen. They have a small cottage, but here's the trick. You got to take a train to get up there. And the Nazis were stopping the trains and looking for Jews in the trains to take them off and arrest them. So the only way my family could get up there is to go one by one, wearing a lot of clothes, right? Because they couldn't really take a suitcase. They just, whatever they could take. They went one by one from Brussels on the train to Mechelen until it was my mom's turn. She was the last one. She gets on the train. She has her hair in pigtails to look younger. The train stops. A Gestapo officer gets on, and he starts looking, literally like this, looking, because they thought they could spot Jews, which was kind of a joke. I'll tell you why. The perfect Aryan baby, according to the Nazis, was this baby. That baby was actually Jewish. That's why. That's why. But they thought they could spot Jews. So they look at my mom. I'm going to look at you. I'll make you really uncomfortable, right? You're my mom, right? They look at her, and the Gestapo officer goes like this to her. Come here. Now my mom's heart is pounding. How old are you? 13. She's 12. Her heart's pounding because she thinks she's going to be arrested. And he says, "Come here, sit on my lap." So now she's on his lap, and now she's really dying. What is she going to do? And he says to her, "You remind me of my daughter." And she makes kind of a funny face and laughs, but inside she was dying. Now, that moment, she could have cried, she could have fallen apart, but here's the thing that happened with kids during the Holocaust. You grew up overnight. You had to make life or death decisions as an adult, right then and there. Right? Had she cried, what would have happened? Yeah, she would have been arrested, right? So she just went along and laughed and said, "Oh, your daughter," and she tried to talk to him, and she made nice. They finally get to the hiding place in Mechelen. Remember Mechelen, the north? And there it is. This little house in the middle of the woods. And it was called, in Flemish, the Groene Villa. The Groene Villa. Everyone say Groene Villa. You know what that means in Flemish? The green house. It was the green house. And it was right outside of Mechelen in a tiny, tiny village called Rijmenum. It was tiny. That is the Caserne d'Ossat, the holding barracks I told you about. I'm going to pass this book around. This book lists every single Belgian Jew deported from that place to Auschwitz and killed. It tells you their birth date, how old they were, and what transport and what cattle car they were in. And there are 25,000 names. Babies, toddlers, kids your age, your parents' age, your grandparents' age, your great-grandparents' age. Here's an actual letter that I met this person who actually delivered food to my family at the Groene Villa in the hiding place. Can I read it to you? Dear Stephen, you asked me for my memories about your mother and her family at the Groene Villa. I want to tell you everything I still remember. Every evening, 2 evenings in the week, I drove to the villa to bring vegetables and milk. Only in the summer, my uncle, Leonard van Relaar, my uncle sometimes came to get the food. I went to the villa by bike. I drove mostly in the dark. At that time, it was dangerous to ride while your lights were on because it was possible that the English or American bombers could see that light. Mostly at 6 p.m. I left my home, and at 10 p.m. I had to be back home because at 10 p.m. the curfew was imposed. I remained a few hours at the villa. It must have been very difficult for them. They were used to live as a free person, and suddenly they became forced to hide themselves at a place where they couldn't remove themselves during the day, and where in the evening and at night no beam of light was allowed to shine through the window. Only a few hundred meters of the villa the Germans were encamped. Coincidentally, neighbors knew that something strange was going on, but they have never known that there lived Jews. Now, in November of 1943, David's brother, my grandfather's brother, his name was Max, his family was hiding in another city in the north. They came to check out the Groene Villa because they thought maybe it was safer to hide in the Groene Villa. On their way back to their hiding place, Max and his family were arrested. Max, was 38 years old, his wife was 35, and they had a 10-year-old daughter, Jenny. They were all arrested, and they were taken to the Caserne d'Ossat. This is the actual record of the three of them, and they were on the 33rd transport. They were deported November 27th, 1943, and they were gassed immediately. Now, when my mom heard that her uncle and her cousin Jenny and her aunt had been arrested, she was already so scared at the Gruna Villa. She couldn't sleep. She was having panic attacks. She was so uptight. And my grandfather brought everyone together and he said, literally, why should all of us die if one of us could live? Why should all of us die if one of us could live? Who wants to go? And my mom raised her hand. And she said, I'll go. She was 12 and a half years old. So at 3:30 in the morning on December 29th, 1943, she left her family. She said goodbye, and to the day she died, she would recall that moment as if it happened yesterday, sobbing in her parents' arms because she didn't know if she would ever see them again. And Leonard Van Relaar took her to the south. He took her to the south of Belgium, to the city of Liège. So they went from right around here to right there. And that begins the story of my mom hiding in 4 or 5 different houses. Whenever there was a suspected roundup of Jews, they would move her because all the houses she stayed in were members of the resistance. This guy here, he was the postmaster general, and she stayed in his house. He was the head of the resistance. She would send letters to her family through the underground network because he was the postmaster general. That's how we found my mom's letters, 25 of them that she wrote during hiding. Can I share some of them with you? And by the way, his son was Georges Deboucher. He was Arthur Deboucher. He was Georges. He was your age. He was your age. He loved my mom, and he always tried to talk to her, but my mom never talked to him. Why didn't she talk to him? Why do you think? It was dangerous to talk. My mom never said anything. She knew that if she opened her mouth, he could go to school and say, hey, I got this Jewish girl hiding with me. And then she would be arrested. She never talked. She also had a different name. Her name was no longer Bella. Now she was the supposed niece of Arthur. Her name was Mariette, Mariette Deboucher. Overnight, Jewish children in the Holocaust who survived by hiding, they had to change their name and their religion. And their religion overnight. She was a Jewish girl, and overnight she had to learn how to become Catholic, go to Mass, go to church. This is one of her letters, just checking time. December 29th, Mes chers, je suis bien arrivé chez Agnès avec parrain. Dearest ones, I arrived safely at Agnès's, which was her aunt. Her actual aunt was hiding 2 towns away. Everyone has the flu, even on the trains. So Jeanne should not travel right now. She called the man she was staying with Uncle Arthur. Uncle does not want me to eat my butter. Butter was rationed. You got around this much butter every week. He is unhappy because he wants me to eat his butter, but I don't want to go overboard. I don't know what to do. She didn't want to appear greedy, and she didn't know what to do. What do you think she meant by everyone has the flu, even on the trains? It was code. What it meant was, it's dangerous. Don't go out. Many of her letters were coded. And that's what she's saying. Don't let my sister go out. Don't go out. It's really dangerous. Now, her real aunt, who's hiding 2 towns away with her family, wanted to send her to boarding school. That was code for a convent school. Oh, that's my that's my signal. So we're going to wrap up real soon. They wanted her to go to a convent school. It was very hard, but 4,000 Jewish children in Belgium were hidden in convents and in the Catholic schools there because they felt that that was the safest place for a Jewish child. What German soldier would come into a convent? Wait. They finally get her into the convent school. Finally. She is now 13 and a half. I'm going to read you this letter, if I can. Can I read it to you? I am writing from the boarding school where I arrived on Wednesday. I won't go to class tomorrow because all of the girls go back home for 2 weeks. I will stay here, and after I will be in the 7th grade. You must be surprised to see how fast things went. I learned about it Wednesday morning, so I had to get all my stuff together. I need a lot of things, dearest ones. We pray a lot here. Today I went to the 6 o'clock Mass. I get up every day at 5:45 a.m. and I go to bed at 8:30 p.m. The Reverend Mother gave me rosary beads and a prayer book. I have to buy everything and I will need money to spend. By the way, her parents even had false names. Her father's name was David, but now in the letter he's called Daniel. Her mother had a Polish Yiddish name, Fela, but now her name is Genevieve. All the Jews took saints' names, Catholic saints' names. So she writes, if you knew how lost I feel, how I miss you, and my dear Danielle and my sweet Genevieve. I spend my time sewing numbers on my clothes. I sleep in the dormitory with all the other students. Our beds are separated by a small wall. The students are nice, but I am very lonely, and I think about you all the time. I will never go out, and I don't know if someone will come and see me. Who would come? I don't know if I will like it here, but I think it is normal that I should be sad. It's the first time that I am going to boarding school, and in what circumstances. Lots of kisses, dearest ones. Think about me and wish me strength. I love you, and I think about you all of the time. Your Isabel. She has a new name. It's no longer Mariette. Now it's Isabel. Isabel Lambrecht. Every night she had to sleep in the cemetery, next to the statue of the Virgin Mary. The Reverend Mother told her, if the Virgin Mary nods her head yes, then you should become Catholic. So every morning they would unlock the cemetery, and my mother would say, she said no, I should stay Jewish. One day, one of the sisters got very curious and said things like, Isabel, why doesn't your family come see you? Why don't you get gifts? Why don't you get cards? Why don't you go home like the other girls? And this nun started asking lots of questions. So the Reverend Mother brought Isabel in, my mother in. My mother is dressed like a nun in training, a postulant. She's dressed with a big crucifix and rosary beads. And the Reverend Mother says, Isabel, I want you to go to the pharmacy and I want you to fill this prescription. My mother goes to the pharmacy. The pharmacist looks at her. It's a beautiful sunny day, right around this time. And the pharmacist says, Isabel, look up in the sky, right now. She looks up. Do you see the storm clouds in the sky, Isabel? Look hard. Do you see the storm clouds? And then he looked at her. And he wrote an address on the prescription. She took a look at the address, and she walked 10 miles to that address. And she never went back to the convent. That afternoon, the Gestapo came for her to arrest her in the convent. So now she walks to the new hiding place, and that's it. That's the house she walked to, right there. And that's the woman that hit her, and that's my mom with her years later. But that's the woman that hit her. There was a terrible air raid when she got there. And the law of the land is you have to let any German soldier in during an air raid. So now there's an air raid, there's a knock at the door, And there's a platoon of German soldiers. And my mother doesn't know what to do. So they are all she says, come, let's hide under the table. You were supposed to hide under any table during an air raid. Like that was going to save you. And she's under the table with all of these German soldiers. And again, her heart's pounding. She whips out her rosary beads and she says, brothers, let us pray. Because remember, she learned all the Catholic prayers. And that saved her life again. The final story, and then we'll take some questions. Remember, I told you she was hiding 2 towns away from her real aunt? Remember? Well, this is her. That's her aunt. Her name was Stefa. Her war name was Agnes. You see these 2 little children? Agnes was hiding with them. She goes to get food. She scrounges for food and she comes back, and she kept the kids at home, but now they're missing. They were arrested. The children were arrested. So my aunt is out of her mind. Word gets back to my mother, who's your age. My mother comes over, and my aunt is screaming, I want to turn myself in. I can't live if my children aren't here. My mother ties her aunt to a chair, takes a wine bottle, hits her over the head and knocks her out so she won't turn herself in. And she writes this letter to her father. I see that you have not heard what happened to the children, but you must have gotten my letter by now. It's horrible, but next week we will know more. Everything is being done to try to cure them. Code, to rescue them. Aunt Agnes is completely broken up. It's almost 10 days since they got sick. What would your mom and dad do if you were gone and your parents did not know where you were for 10 days? What do you think your parents would do? What would your parents do? Would they flip out? Yeah. Would they be upset? Of course. Right? So, my mother's letter saved her cousins because my grandfather got in touch with the underground. They sent 2 men with guns to the place where the kids were being held. They rescued the kids. They rescued them, and one of the guy's fingers got shot off on the way out. You see that big book that I sent around with all the names? The really big, thick book? Who has the big, thick book? Raise your hand. This little boy helped write it. He grew up to help write it. So, in the interest of time, there are many other stories, but that gives you a sense of what she went through. And her family was one of 3 intact Jewish families to survive all together. Father, mother, and 2 sisters. And they were reunited in Brussels after the war, and that is my mom after the war is over, when Brussels was liberated. And remember good old King Leopold? Remember him? With the beautiful wife who got killed? Well, guess what he did? When the Germans invaded, he surrendered the Belgian army in 2 weeks. So everyone thought he was a traitor. And then, to top it off, remember the beautiful wife he had who was killed? Well, he remarried. He remarried a woman who was a Nazi sympathizer. So after the war, he wanted to become king again because the Germans had taken him at that point to a castle in Germany, and the Belgians said, not so fast. And they forced him to abdicate. They forced him to step down. That's the actual picture of him signing the abdication papers. And his son took over. So they threw him out as king. And that's my mom after the war with an actual English soldier. They were known as Tommies. And She came to America on a student visa for 16 when she was 18 years old. She met this guy who had fought in the Philippines in World War II, my dad, and they got married. That's her coming over to marry him. And they got married at Penn State. Go Nittany Lions. Remember the young guy who liked my mom? That's him and me together when I met him. That's an actual declaration from the King of Belgium thanking that family. That's another man whose father hid my mom. And this is the Gruna Villa today. It's no longer green, it's white. And that gives you a sense of how isolated it was. I think we're going to leave it there so that we have time for questions. So, what questions do you have for me about the story you just heard? Anyone? Yes, sir.
When were you born? When were you born?
I was born in 1776. I'm 100 and whatever, 300 years old. I was born in 1953. I was born after the war. And I was a Belgian citizen till I was 18 years old. I was a dual citizen till I was 18 years old, and then you had to declare citizenship. So as much as I love Belgium, I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm an American citizen. So there you have it. Yes. Go ahead. Yes. Can you repeat?
She asked, did you ever visit the greenhouse? I think you showed us photos.
Yes, I did. In fact, we were there just a couple months ago in the Gruna Villa, and we had lunch in the Gruna Villa, and it was really very, very special. Yes. Go ahead. When what?
What is the greenhouse used for now?
What is it? The same family that hid my mom, their descendants are there. They're still in that house. Yeah. Yes.
So, you said that Steffa had two kids? One of them had spread the...
Yes.
What happened to the daughter?
The daughter, she her name was Jeanette, and she grew up to have a normal, somewhat normal life. She married a man named Morris, and his story is incredible. He was on his way to Auschwitz as a 16-year-old, and he was on a cattle car with his father and his brother, his younger brother and his father. And one of the slats in the cattle car came loose, and he had to make a split-second choice. He couldn't take both of them. He had to take one. And he decided that his brother was young enough that he might have a chance to live, but his father would not have had a chance. So his father came with him through the slat, but his brother was killed.
Dr. Weiner, we're going to make a line of questions for you.
Oh, okay.
Just so that everybody can hear.
Okay. Hiya.
Oh, hello. Your mom's two best friends. Whatever happened to them? Or
Yes, so Marie, the one in the middle, she escaped to Switzerland, and the one on the right was killed.
Oh, you said that.
Yeah.
Oh.
So when my mom, after the war, she was the only Jewish girl in her class, and they used to call her Queen Esther. And people would come up to her and shake her on the street and say, "Why did you live, and why did my child die?" It was a very, very hard time.
Oh, also, if you personally were in this situation, when your her father said she should jump off of the building and hide, would you straight up listen to him, or would you be like, what? Question him?
It's really hard. It's really hard to know what you would do in that kind of situation. I guess, she was 11 years old. You listen to your parents when you're 11, so you would probably have done it. They were just saved by the officer asking, "I'm lost, give me some directions." So, okay. Thank you. Hi.
Hi. 2 questions. So, when you were sharing the story about when your mother was in hiding with her aunt, and her aunt like wanted to like kind of give herself out,
Yes.
and your mom had like knocked her out.
Knocked her out.
Was her aunt later like mad at her for that? Like, what happened after that?
What happened after that is that my mom's letter got to my grandfather, the one I read to you. He notified the resistance. The resistance sent 2 men to rescue the kids. The kids got rescued. They were 7 and 9. They got rescued, and my aunt was reunited with her children. And she was a formidable woman. She was incredible, my Aunt Steffa. She was tough. But that moment when she thought she lost her kids forever was her worst moment of her life. Yeah.
And then my second question was like, if you could, like for the younger generation, like if you would want them to know like one thing about like this time period, like what would you want them to remember?
Wow. That's a great question. I would want them to remember that, and you might not expect this, but I'm here and my mom survived because there were good people in the world. As horrible as the Holocaust was, in the Shoah, in Hebrew it's called the Shoah, as horrible as the Shoah was, and 6 million Jews died, but there were good people who cared enough to take incredible risks to save the life of one child, my mother. And there's an old Jewish saying that he who saves the life of one saves the entire world. And I would want you to know and remember that every day you have a choice to make a good decision and help somebody who needs their help. If someone's being bullied, if someone doesn't have a friend, if someone's being teased about their race, their religion, their heritage, to step up and defend them, because that's what these people did for my family. And that's what I would hope and pray that all of you do. Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
So, as you were growing up with your mother, because clearly she went through like a lot while she was very young, did she ever like reminisce on her experiences, but like kind of like have like PTSD type experiences?
So these questions, by the way, are amazing. The answer is absolutely. They were called war stories. And I did my doctoral dissertation on children of survivors. And anyone who had a survivor parent, you either grew up in 2 ways. If your parent never talked about their experiences, then you struggled as a teenager. You really struggled. If you grew up hearing about the stories, at least you knew what happened. And that was my mom. My mom talked about her stories all the time, and her PTSD was deep. And even into her 50s and 60s, she would have panic attacks, usually at 3:30 in the morning. And she would just recount everything as if it was yesterday. The fear never left. Never left. And children of survivors all talk about that. That was a dynamic of our family. And I didn't know. I thought everybody either had a tattoo on their arm from the camp, concentration camp, or had an accent. And I remember when I was in 1st grade coming home and going, Mommy, Mommy, I met American Mommy today. I was really excited, right? Someone who didn't have an accent, because my mom had a very thick French accent. Our lives were totally impacted by their experiences. Thank you so much. That was a great question. All of them are. Hey, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Okay, thank you. I apologize. I didn't realize. All right, go ahead, sir.
Did your mom's parents and her sister, did they just stay in the greenhouse after she left?
They stayed in the Gruna Villa. They never went out, ever. And it was completely dark at night, and they couldn't make a sound during the day. Yeah.
I have one more question. It is, like when she went to like meet up like with her parents again, how did they like know how to find each other?
Yeah. Well, they decided, they wrote a letter to each other and they decided to meet each other at the train station in Brussels. And that's how they met. And while they were there was a young girl that my grandfather recognized. Her hair was all missing. She had typhus. She was very sick. And my grandfather knew her parents before the war. She was the only survivor. She had survived 4 concentration camps and the Auschwitz death march. And she lived with my grandfather and their family for 2 years. And she came to America. She married a guy, and they moved to California. And her kids, you may know them. How many of you ever heard of the Incredible Hulk? This woman's son wrote the Incredible Hulk. How many of you ever heard of Pay It Forward, the movie Pay It Forward? Some of you have. Her daughter is a very famous director and has directed many famous movies. So there you go. There you have. Thank you. Hello.
Hi. What like made you decide that you wanted to start spreading more information about like your mother's past?
Wow. What made me? That's a very powerful question. Children of survivors, like myself, feel obligated. We feel obligated. It is a deep sense of obligation. I can't explain it. We have to tell that story. We have no choice. You have to tell the story so that people remember. Because there are a lot of people in the world right now, unfortunately, that say the Holocaust never happened. 6 million Jews weren't killed. They literally say it's just a lie. And it wasn't a lie. And so I feel an obligation to tell her story, to pass it on, and for all of you to know this story. So when someone comes to you and says, hey, the Holocaust never happened, you can say, I'm sorry, but it did. And I just heard a presentation about it, and I know it happened. Thank you for that.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I have one more follow-up
Oh,
question,
yeah.
if that's okay.
Your questions are amazing. Go ahead.
How has your mother's experiences helped you grow as a person?
My God. You're like 13 going on 34. That's an incredible question. It has shaped me to my core. It's made me appreciate the beauty of life. It's made me appreciate the goodness of others. It's made me also appreciate that sometimes the world can be a dangerous place. And I will confess, I always have a plan B. Always, always, always. My grandfather stays with me to this day. I always I talk about plan Bs to my friends, to my family. I always have a plan B if something doesn't work out.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Madam. Forgive me.
How did it feel getting to meet the people who saved your parents?
That's a great question. When I first met them, I broke down, and I was very emotional, and they were very emotional. Some of them didn't realize that my mother's name was Bella. They remembered her as Mariette or Isabelle. And they all said, oh, your mother was so beautiful. Your mom was so beautiful. I loved her. And I just wanted to talk to her, but she never talked. And that's what they said. So it was a very emotional thing. And the way in which I found them, I wrote to the Belgian government, and the Belgian government said, we will not release any information. So you know how I found them? The Mormon Church. The Mormon Church has records on everybody. So I contacted the Mormon Church in my town, and the Mormon Church got me in touch with the ward, the Mormon ward in Brussels, and they got all the addresses for me. Unbelievable. That's a great question.
How does it feel being one of the few people to be alive telling this story?
Well, it's a great privilege. it's a great privilege. And I take it very seriously and very much to heart. So thank you. I appreciate that. Hi.
Hi. So I just have two quick questions for you. When did your mother pass away?
1992. Today is 34 years.
Rest in peace.
Today. She's with us today. Yes.
And so you said that the town was called Brussels, right?
The capital, yes.
So was that where Brussels sprouts originated?
Yes. That's right. Absolutely.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
you go. It is cool. Go ahead. The phone's ringing. I'm not going to answer the phone.
Ever since you've heard all these stories, like, how do you feel about them? Like, even knowing about this?
Yeah. Well, when I decided to write the book, because I found the 25 letters that she had written that my grandfather had kept, it took me 10 years to write it because I was so emotional. Every time I read a letter, I would break down. And I just didn't know if I could do it. And eventually I just put my mind to it, and I did it.
Also, so my name is Bella, and my best friend's name is Frida. So.
Oh my gosh! Wow!
Yeah.
Wow!
We'll see
Well, it's a beautiful name. Thank you. Hiya.
Hi. So like, I know that like the Jews they had like those like sign up sheets or whatever and like the stars to like show like that they were Jewish, but like how would they distribute them out? Like did they like just assume, or did they have records on the people and like?
They had records on everybody.
Okay.
They had records on everybody. You had to register so they knew exactly where you lived. They knew your occupation. They knew everything about you. And so that was one way. But the Nazis were very, very big on racial theory, and they had crazy racial theories. And they thought they could recognize Jews by facial characteristics, which was all nonsense. But
okay.
That's what they did.
And like, how did they like override like the documents to like make
How
them?
did they what?
Like kind of like make them like, so like I know that they would like make themselves seem Catholic or whatever, but like would they override like their own documents about it, or like would they make up documents about themselves? And
the Catholic Church in Belgium was very heroic, and the Archbishop of Belgium, Cardinal van Rooij, was a virulent anti-Nazi, and he instructed the priests in all the parishes to basically create legal Catholic adoption papers for Jewish children.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yep. And now my mom didn't have that, but the two little kids that were taken, they had legal Catholic adoption papers. They were still taken, though.
Huh.
So sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, hi.
Hi. How did they? How many families did they stay with in total in like houses?
My mom circulated around 5 different houses, and every time there was a suspected roundup by the Gestapo, they would move her to a different house.
How did they know like how to send where to send the letters to?
Well, the guy who was the postmaster general, his resistance, his underground men knew where my mom's family was hiding in Heimenum, and so they delivered it to the Grüne Villa. And probably they delivered it at night when nobody was around. Yeah. Hi.
So throughout the years when your mother went from Jewish to being Catholic, did she have any like more stories, or does that like does that have like a downside, like a good part in your life, or did it like have a role in your life?
Well, the good part of my life is I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the Catholic Church in some way. But she never really talked about it. There were a lot of Jewish children, though, that were hidden by Catholic families, because Belgium is 99% Catholic, who never went back to Judaism. If their parents were killed, they remained Catholic, and some did. And some Catholic families were very respectful of the kids that they were hiding, of their Jewish heritage, and some were not. Some were very brutal to the children, and some were not. My mom was lucky. However, one of the things I didn't tell you is that every house that my mom hid in, my mom basically was Cinderella. She cooked, cleaned, ironed, dusted. She did anything she could to stay in their good graces, anything. So she worked very, very hard in every house to kind of ingratiate herself to the people, right? Yep. There you go. Good question. Thank you. Hey.
My first question is, was it just your mom like hiding in the house, or were there other people hiding there?
At the Grüne Villa?
Yeah.
It was just my mom, her sister Jeanne, her father, and her mother. That was it. That was it. And then, towards the end of the war, one other family came because their house had been bombed, and it was the landlord of the Grüne Villa. And my grandfather panicked, and he thought, oh my God, they're going to throw us out. But the landlord was very kind, and he said, no, can we come in with you? And my grandfather said, it's your house. So they became very good friends. By the way, remember Monsieur Jacquemer, the guy that wrote the anonymous letter? My grandfather visited him with some resistance men after the war. And I asked my grandfather once, I said, what happened? What did you do? And he just smiled. He wouldn't tell me. Go ahead. Oh, another question?
Oh, that was my second question.
Oh,
What
okay.
happened to the guy?
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
What was your reaction to like finding out about what happened to your mom?
What was my reaction? Yeah. I was kind of numb to it because ever since I was little, I grew up with these stories. I knew them. I knew them by heart. My mom would just talk about them over and over and over, and that was part of her PTSD. That was part of her way of kind of going through it. To an extent, her life kind of got frozen in time during that time period.
And how old were you when you found out?
How old was I? When she started telling me these stories, I was around 5 or 6. And there's some research that they've done on children of survivors that many children have a very bad emotional reaction at the exact same age that their parents were initially traumatized. So my mom was 11. When I was 11, I didn't want to go to school. I refused to go to school. Refused to go to school. She was 11 when the war started. I was 11 when I had that reaction. Crazy, right? When I read that research, I thought, oh my God, that's me. But that's what happens. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Hi.
I know you kind of already asked it or kind of answered this question, but we, in our ELA class, we got stumped with the question of, Anne Frank thought that everybody was generally good at heart.
Yes.
Do you believe, everybody is good at heart?
I believe that everybody is born with good instincts, and life can shape you differently, right? But I do believe that everyone is born, when you look at a baby or a 2-year-old and you smile and wave, what do? They smile and wave back. I think life plays a big part. What your parents tell you, what your teachers tell you, what you read in the papers and social media, that can influence you as you get older. But I do think I agree with Anne Frank. Yeah, good question. These are amazing questions.
So I have 2 questions. The second one's not too in depth of a question.
Okay.
But my first is I realize how like hard it has to be able to like push aside the pain to be able to talk about things like this, but like what's some advice you'd give to other people that have went through events that they're too afraid to talk about and like tell authority that needs to be told?
My goodness. Well, you're talking to a psychologist, you're talking to a child psychologist and a therapist. So what I would tell you is it's really important if you've gone through any kind of trauma or something that has left you feeling really badly, that you need to find a safe person and a safe space where you can talk about it with somebody, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a rabbi or a priest or a pastor, whether it's a teacher that you trust, but you need to be able to share it and talk about it. And that way you can at least begin to try to understand how it's impacting you and ways in which you can kind of live your life and integrate that into your life without it being your life. Do you know what I mean? Okay.
And my second one was the less serious one. I was wondering if me and Carter could get a photo with you before we leave.
Oh, yes. We'll definitely get a photo. Okay. Thank you. Great question. Hi.
Hello. I was wondering, when you were talking about how the children were saved by the two men, were there, like, there was a bunch of other kids with them, right, that were, like, being held?
In the convent?
Mm-hmm.
It depends. Some convents had a number of Jewish kids, some didn't. There was a little 5-year-old girl that was in the convent school with my mom, and she was 5. And she went up to my mother and said, "Isabel, I have a very big secret to tell you." And my mother, your age, said, "You mustn't tell your secret to anyone. You mustn't tell your secret to anyone." Because my mom knew that the little girl was probably going to tell her that she was Jewish. So, yeah. So there are a number of Jewish children. There's a very famous abbé in an abbey, and I can't say it in English. Is it abbé? Yeah, abbé in French. And he was very, very well known, Father André, and he's a Belgian national hero because he hid so many. There's a picture of him. We didn't have a chance to see it, but he was such a kind man, and he saved many, many Jewish lives. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, how are ya?
I know a lot of people ask like similar questions to this, but like, how would you think like you would have like grown up and like become yourself if your mother hadn't told all those stories?
That's a very interesting question. Had I not been exposed to this, so in my doctoral dissertation, you know what a dissertation is? You probably don't. A dissertation is when you are becoming a doctor, you have to write a very, very big research paper. And my research paper was on children of survivors. So, and then you have to be interviewed by a whole board of professors, right? And they ask you a lot of questions about your paper. They read it and they tear it apart and they critique it. And so my dissertation, my study was, I compared children of survivors to Jewish kids who were not from survivor families. And the big difference is that children of survivors grew up with a worldview that was very different and tended to be a little bit more suspicious, a little more paranoid, a little bit more distrustful, and a little more sensitive about talking about their Jewish identity than their American Jewish control group. So, good question.
Thank you.
Hello.
What do you think for you is the most impactful thing that you've learned from your mother's experiences?
The most impactful thing was what I told you earlier, which is picture yourself in her shoes. And I'm sure as I was telling my story about her, you were all thinking, what would I have done in that situation? Were you all thinking that? Like, what would I have done when the German officer told me to sit on the lap? When when her father said, "Who wants to go?" right? When the air raid happened, right? Think about that. What would you have done? And so I think the impact for me was my mom was an incredibly mature and amazingly intuitive person to kind of figure out what she needed to do to survive. And my feeling is that all of you, if you were in the same situation, you would probably do the same things. That sometimes these kinds of traumatic situations, all of a sudden you operate as if you're an adult. You grow up overnight. So that's the most impactful thing. Because I grew up thinking like that. And of course, and one of the things that they found out about children of survivors, we never think that we could have ever measured up to them. How could, when I was 12, I don't know my middle name. How could I have done what my mom did? How could I have gone through that? So you always feel like, you always look up to them like they're superheroes, right? That you could never do what they did. But chances are you would have. You would have. So, thank you. Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
I was wondering if your father had his own point of view of the Holocaust.
My father? So my father, as I told you, fought in World War II. He was a POW, a prisoner of war. He was the only survivor of an ambush of his battalion. He was a sniper. And his battalion got ambushed. He fell off a cliff. And when he regained consciousness, there were a bunch of Japanese soldiers all around him, and they took him to a POW camp. So he had his own trauma. And by the time he met my mom, he was a veteran, if you will. He had matured. He had, gone through his own trauma. She was a survivor, so they were very, very mature. They kind of understood each other from that point of view, from the trauma point of view.
Did he escape, or was he freed after the war?
The day that Japan surrendered, they opened the gates and he walked out. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Hello.
I have two questions. I noticed in your story about your mom when she sat down on the soldiers'
Yep, on the lap.
Yeah, and in other situations, I noticed that you said her heart was pounding a lot. Yeah. Was that something like her PTSD, like what happened in Yeah.
Yeah, she was panicking, right? And when you get really scared, what happens? Your heart goes like that. Yeah.
And then second question, I know someone else said something like this, but what would you say to the children of the generation of Jews? What would you say to them if they didn't really know anything about the Holocaust?
Yeah. Well, I think it's incumbent upon not just Jewish children, but all children, not just Jewish children, to understand the Holocaust, to understand that it happened, to understand that people made some terrible choices. The Nazis were evil. They were evil, and they made horrible choices, and they committed full-scale genocide against the Jewish people, right? And yet, there was this other side of humanity, the side of humanity that saved my family, and that's and that is the puzzle of being human, right? And I think it's incumbent to remember these stories and pass it down so that we honor the memory of those babies and toddlers and children and middle schoolers and high schoolers and parents and grandparents that weren't lucky and that were senselessly slaughtered. And it's our duty to remember them and honor them, honor their memory that way. Thank you. Okay, we're down to 3.
Hi.
All right. Hey.
I thought of two more quick questions.
2 more.
So, how do you think that knowing these stories and growing up with these stories altered the way that you think about certain situations in life?
Wow, that's great. My family has a plan B. My family has a plan B. If I think that we're in a position where we could be threatened or the Holocaust could happen again, I literally have a plan. And we have 3 daughters, and they know the plan. My wife knows the plan, and I'm ready. I literally am ready. And I think some people think that that's a little nuts, but everyone thought my grandfather was nuts. So that's how I've dealt with it.
And my second question kind of like piggybacks off of that one. Like, looking back on your life, like what areas in your life have you like sat back and like thought about like a certain story that you've heard that like kind of connects to what you're going through?
All the time. Every day. I literally go through it every day. My brother, one of the things that from the research on children of survivors is that the oldest in the family rebels. They want nothing to do with the Holocaust. They want nothing to do with it. The youngest is the one that gets involved. So my family followed that exact pattern, and now my brother can't get enough. And he texts me every day about, tell me about this story, tell me about that story, tell me about... And when we went to Belgium together this last time, we went to the Grüne Villa. And so he met the family, and he can't get enough of it. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Hey.
I also have 2 questions.
Yes.
The first is, like, after your mom escaped and everything and was, like, kind of, like, living, like, a normal life, did she ever, like, have, like, moments where she was still scared of, like, police officers, or if she, like, saw them on the street or, like, saw their cars, where she would still be, like, scared?
Boy, these are great questions. She was once walking down the street with another survivor, and I'll tell you 2 quick stories. She was walking down the street with another survivor who had survived Auschwitz, and the survivor, they were literally arm in arm walking, and her friend started screaming, and pointing at a man. It was one of the guards from the camp. And it was very, very traumatic. And then when I was young, there was a big World's Fair in Montreal, Canada. And there were different countries had different pavilions at the World's Fair. And Israel had a pavilion at the World's Fair. And they had this thing, this screen, this cryon screen that went around, and it showed people going into, it's horrible, but it showed people going into the gas chambers. And my mom stopped, and she looked, and she said, and she started to scream and cry, and she said, "That's my boyfriend." That was her first boyfriend, and she recognized him going into the gas chamber.
And my second question is like, after like all of these stories and stuff, did that ever like kind of like affect the way you saw like law and like government or like people in charge?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I'm always kind of a little bit vigilant about things, and how the Jewish folks in America are being treated and what is being said, and I'm very sensitive to that. And I think that's one of the manifestations of being a survivor's child. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last one.
Hi.
Hiya.
So you confirmed you had kids, correct?
Yes, 3. We have 3 daughters.
So, depending on how you answer this is going to lead to another question. But have you told your kids about your mother's
Yes.
adventures? Do you expect for them to carry on her legacy?
Yes. So, 2 things. They each have a copy. They have a copy of this book that I wrote about the letters. They have a copy of the book, so they have read it. And one of the research things that came out, and this is very complicated, so follow me. All of us have DNA. You know what DNA is, right? We all have DNA, right? Well, there's And one of the stress genes, one of our stress genes, there's a certain location on the stress gene that they have found that has been altered in survivors because of their trauma. The stress, that place on the stress gene has been altered, and that has been passed on to the children. It's passed on to the second generation and the third generation, meaning my children. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty heavy duty, right? So we're so way over. You guys are amazing. That's my mom. When she came to this country, she was a model for a while. And this is her legacy. Bella Flora, that's my niece Ella Flora. David, my grandfather, my nephew David. Isabel, member in the convent, and that's my other niece, little Isabel. That's my family. My wife Rita, Lisa, our daughter Marla. Lisa is a financial advisor. Marla is a Broadway actress, and Olivia is a advertiser. And I'll end. This is one of the last pictures we have of her. Long after I am gone, the story of my mother, Bella Flora Vach, will be your story. Thank you.
If anybody has any questions for Dr. Weiner that we didn't get to just for time's sake, just send me a Schoology message and I will email him. I have his email address and I will make sure he gets them. Can we once again say thank you to Dr. Weiner? Thank you. Okay. Okay. And with that, you may all go back to period 7 for the next couple minutes.